Welcome to the Cherish and Conquer podcast, the show dedicated to celebrating female entrepreneurs' strength, resilience, and innovation. Be inspired by stories of women and what they cherish to help them conquer against all odds. Every other week, you will learn from remarkable women on how they navigate challenges, uphold their values, and create sustainable success. And now, here's your host, Jim Rembach.
Hello, and welcome to the Cherish and Conquer podcast. And so I have a question for you. Do you have problems, complex problems, that you need to solve? Because this is actually the episode that you want to listen and or watch. Because we have Cheryl Strauss Einhorn on the show today. Cheryl, welcome.
Thank you. So good to be here with you.
I'm looking forward to this discussion today. So you've actually been doing a lot of research and have a new book that's out. And before we get to talking to that specifically, just in your own words, if you could help listeners and watchers understand, how are you making a difference in the people's lives with the work that you're doing today?
Well, I hope that I'm helping to give people greater confidence and conviction that they can reach their goals. If you have a good decision-making process that you think can work well for you, it helps you move better into your good future. And that's a really beautiful way to be able to feel about what is going to be able to unfold for you.
Yeah, and how you do that, and I'll give a little bit of context to that. Cheryl is actually the founder of Decisive, and they're a decision sciences company that trains people and teams in complex problem solving and decision-making skills using the Area Method, and we'll talk about that in a second. She's also the author of 3 books, which is Problem Solved, A Powerful System for Making Complex Decisions with Confidence and Conviction, Investing in Financial Research, a decision-making system for better results about financial and investment decisions, and then Problem Solver, which is her most recent, which is maximizing your strengths to make better decisions. So Cheryl, if you could help us understand, the Area Method, and then also what you have learned in regards to how people go about making decisions.
Absolutely. So Area is a system for complex problem solving that is meant to uniquely control for and counter our mental mistakes, these cognitive biases that we all have that help us make many decisions quickly, but don't go away when we're solving for complex problems. And so the idea is to go through each of the steps which take you into different perspectives of a problem so that you really end up with a holistic solution that gives your decision a better chance to succeed. So that is Area, and just a very brief understanding of what it is. And then your second question was what?
What have you learned in regards to how people go about decision making?
So what I've recognized is that many people have some kind of a process, but they can't always describe to you what that process is. And they tend to bring the same process over and over, despite the fact that decisions are different from one another. And what my research has shown is something that we all know through experience, but haven't really been able to unpack. And that is that there are really 5 different dominant ways that people solve problems. And if we can understand what those 5 are and which one we are, and the type of problem solver with whom we're making decisions, we can not only strengthen our relationships, but we can make better decisions together.
And so with that, you talk about a problem solver profile.
Yes.
So if you could give us a little bit more understanding of what is a problem solver profile.
So the problem solver profiles are decision archetypes, and there are 5 of them, and each of them has a beautiful strength to the way that they make decisions and move through the world. And each of them has some key cognitive biases associated with them that tend to be problematic for that type of decision maker. And at its essence, each of these 5 problem solver profiles are a value structure that can help you understand that different people are optimizing for different things in their problem solving. So the 5 problem solver profiles, I gave them fun names since we think in language, and this way they can be memorable, is the adventurer, the detective, the listener, the thinker, and the visionary. So would you like me to describe a little bit about
Please.
each one?
Absolutely.
Okay, so the adventurer is our confident, relatively fast-moving decision maker. This is somebody who is driven in part by a very strong gut that helps to guide them on which pathway forward would be best. And so this has a beautiful optimism bias that underlies it, which is that the adventurer, if she makes a decision and it starts to go awry, guess what? The next decision is always ahead. And so that is a beautiful way to move through the world. The adventurer, therefore, can also have a bit of a planning fallacy. They can sort of skip steps in the process as they can identify a pathway forward quickly and not always have all the underlying evidence that they might want to have to better ensure that the decision is going to succeed for them. The next one, the detective, and I'm a detective, is a bit of a slower decision maker. This is somebody who really wants data as their evidence. They like to do research and they let that information lead them. And while that is a nice way to solve problems, some of the cognitive biases associated with being a detective is something like a confirmation bias. Because I'm good at getting research, I can identify data that can support a favored hypothesis, which is not as good as looking for disconfirming data, because you can have a lot of evidence to support something, but if you have one insurmountable hurdle, that problem solution is not going to work out for you. Our next problem solver profile is our listener. This is our collaborative, cooperative, trusting decision maker. This person views information from others as the most important information that they can gather. And so when you really want to canvass your stakeholder perspectives and make sure everybody is included, this is the problem solver profile that naturally is very strong at this. And some of the cognitive biases associated with this would be a liking bias. They might overweight information from somebody that they have an affinity for, and also a social proof bias, where they can be swayed in part by the wisdom of the crowd. Our 4th problem solver profile is our thinker, and this is our slowest, most cautious decision maker. This is somebody who wants to weigh the options one against another, and this is the person who can tell you why they've made the decision that they've made. So it's a very useful person to have at the table, but a key cognitive bias here is a loss aversion. They would rather mitigate the downside than solve either for the best outcome possible or the best possible outcome. And then our final problem solver profile is our visionary. This is our creative and original problem solver. They're somebody who, when you're sitting at a table and you're looking at the options, they can bring things in that haven't even been entertained yet. And one of the key cognitive biases that they have is a scarcity bias, where they may tend to overweight something that is original when an answer that is workaday might be just as good. So what I hope you can see is that each of these problem solver profiles are optimizing for different things. The adventurer for forward momentum, the detective for getting the data, the listener for getting the wisdom of others, the thinker for understanding the why, and the visionary for something creative and original. And so understanding each of these can help you really appreciate the people with whom you make decisions and have a better window into what motivates their decision making.
Myrina.ai draws inspiration from the legendary Amazonian Queen Marina, embodying resilience and strategic brilliance. With our AI-powered SaaS platform, we equip women-led businesses for success in the evolving landscape of AI and business automation. As a partner and community for female-led businesses, Myrina.ai maximizes their potential using AI while providing essential support. Ready to amplify your success using AI with like-minded ladies? Register or learn more at myrina.ai. And now, back to our interview.
Well, as you're explaining this, I start thinking about essentially the people who I'm, in connection with and communication with, and like you said, stakeholders. I think you used the word stakeholders, and where I may be seeking counsel from. I'm thinking that, hey, I need to know, quite frankly, the problem solver profiles of the people who I'm communicating with, in order to be able to put in proper context, for me to be able to make a better decision.
I think that's right. First, I've built an assessment. It's a very short quiz that anybody can take where they can self-identify their own problem solver profile. And I will share with your listeners that if they go to app.areamethod, AREA method.com, they can take the assessment and see what problem solver profile they are. And they can also use this with the other stakeholders in their lives and their teams at work, etc. And if you cannot have somebody take the problem solver profile who you are making a decision with, the knowledge of the 5 profiles will allow you to better listen to other people, to understand how they're describing what's important to them in their decision making. And you can always bring that question in. Jim, when you make a decision, what is it that you need in order to be able to move into action? And then they'll tell you, I need the data. I need to know that others are bought in. I need to really understand that I've examined the options, and so on.
Well, as you start talking about that, I think the practical application is quite expansive, personally and professionally. And I'm even thinking about it in like a sales type of, conversation, is how do I get past no decision, or maybe even a decision to my competitor, with doing that proper inquiry in that manner?
Well, so I have started to think of this as a trust accelerator, because I can now listen to you with a clearer lens. I can move into the conversation farther along to speak towards what I think is your incentive structure based on the kind of problem solver profile that I think that you are. And so I find that very useful, and you're right, it can be applied to everything that you're doing during the day as you're making decisions.
Okay, so I know you've collected a lot of data. So I don't know if you've collected this data, so it would be interesting to note. When I think about entrepreneurs and female entrepreneurs, do you have the data that allows us to get some understanding into those different types of profiles and where female entrepreneurs may fall in that?
So interestingly, I've not seen that there's a gender difference. And I've not seen that there's a career difference. So, you can have a very successful adventurer accountant or thinker accountant, for example. It doesn't seem to matter. Even within families, we have not seen that spouses are the same profile, and we've not seen that the kids are the same as the parents. There seems to be something that maybe is more innate to the individual through the world that may influence their problem solver profile. Of course, we always have our environment acting on us, and the problem solver profiles are not proscriptive. They're not going to tell you what you're going to do next. What I would like you to think of them as is akin to handedness. Most of us are more comfortable with either our right or our left hand, and everything feels more natural with that. Now, you certainly can be ambidextrous, but it's going to take work and it's going to take effort. So, in part, by knowing the problem solver profiles, you also can bring a greater dynamism to the way you're approaching your decisions. Let's say you're a detective like me, but you really would like to build some of those listener strengths. Now that you know the profiles, you could come into a conversation and say, I want to grow into more of the strengths of a listener. And you can see how that feels. It's probably going to be a little bit uncomfortable, but the more that you do it, the more you can also round out some of the different strengths of the different profiles.
Okay, so I'd like to see if you can expand on something you said a moment ago when you referred to gut. So, you will hear people say, "Oh, just trust your gut." And then other people will
Right.
say, "Don't trust your gut," because of many of those biases. So, where do you land on gut in regards to trusting gut, not trusting gut?
So I have a TED talk on this called When Your Inner Voice Lies to You. Because what I have found is even though I have come up with this research and I know that I'm a detective, I am catching myself all the time in those detective blind spots. And that's because they're very strong. And they're two sides of the same coin. The same thing that's good about being a detective, ease of finding data that you think is compelling, is also a detective blind spot in the confirmation bias that I can go ahead and pick something that I think is important and overweight that. So for a detective, trusting your gut may not be that comfortable. Now let's turn to the adventurer who has a very well honed gut. She's going to feel like this has probably worked out very well for her. And that is in part why this beautiful optimism bias also works for her. And so, again, you can see how the cognitive bias of the gut can cut both ways, even for the adventurer.
Okay, so we're all under pressure to make complex decisions quicker. Now, you talked about some profiles being more attuned to doing that. However, there's a risk associated with not, actually doing what's necessary in order to reduce the risk. And, you know, going through and making the decision quickly and then having regret. So, I mean, how do we balance these things?
So, I would say if a decision is reversible, it's easier, I think, to be able to say to yourself, maybe I can make this quickly. If the decision is not and the consequences are really grave, I would think that that's a time where you really want to use a system like my area method, which is going to help you in the process check and challenge and mitigate those biases so that you have conviction that the decision can really work out for you. So I think speed is not only has very different comfort across the five profiles where the adventurer can move the quickest and the thinker often moves the slowest, but the thinker, if they feel like one option is so much clearly better, they also can move more quickly. So there are times where speed becomes easier and where speed is something where it's a liability. And thinking through not only the evidence, but also the reversibility and the consequences, I think can be a guide to people.
As you're talking, I'm starting even to think about my own relationships and interactions with certain people, and I perceive me being someone who, based on a decision, will flip my profile or apply a different profile. And I could be incorrect in regards to that. I don't. That's an interesting possible
So there's
dilemma.
So there's something that I call situationality, which is sort of like how we move through our environments, right? And there's a couple of different factors. There's, sort of our life stage and our place, like the environment that we're in, the stakeholders, and our level of decision ownership, right? Sometimes we're not the owner of that decision. We may show up differently. And sometimes, therefore, our dominant problem solver profile can be overridden. Now, at times that's terrific. Let's say you're in a brand new situation and you normally are a pretty competent decision maker and you might want to move in a particular way, let's say as an adventurer or a detective. But in that new situation, you might want to have an opportunity to sort of gauge the temperature in the room. That sounds like a great time to have your dominant profile take a bit of a back seat. There are other times where we feel a lot of friction in making a decision with somebody else or several other people. Looking at those factors of situationality can help you see what is tending to override how you normally successfully move through your decisions, and can help you rely on some of the strengths of your individual problem solver profile to maneuver your way out of that. And in my new book, Problem Solver, which you mentioned, which is about these profiles, I have a series of what I call cheetah sheets. So let me explain why I use the term cheetah. The cheetah is our fastest land animal, but that's not why she's such a good hunter. It's that she decelerates up to 9 miles an hour in a single stride. That gives her agility, flexibility, and maneuverability. And that's what we need in a quality decision-making process. So throughout all of my books, so that you can literally rip the tools right off the page and plug them into your life, I have cheetah sheets with guiding questions. So if you're in a situation with friction and situationality seems to have really caused a problem for you, answering these questions in that particular cheetah sheet can help you really open up the pathway to be able to have better momentum and to solve the problem that you're facing.
To me, it seems like friction or stress just is inherent when we start talking about these different profiles intermixing and then talking about that application piece. Hey, it's a big decision. What do you cover, and what are some of the things that people need to think about in regards to, trying to keep, and their conflict, like I said, is inherent, but how do I keep it from getting out of, let's just say, or into a caution area or, alert area, so that it doesn't affect what we need to accomplish, like you talk about taking action?
So first of all of the 5 profiles can work very well together. And I actually think the profiles and understanding them reduces interpersonal conflict. And as I mentioned before, can really help you strengthen relationships and no longer tend to think of somebody as hasty or with analysis paralysis. Now you can have an appreciation that an adventurer on your team can quickly identify a pathway forward, can explain why she prefers that pathway, and can help keep the trains running on time. And the same thing with the thinker, they're going to help you prevent the decision from failing. So one thing that the book goes through is how to use these creative tensions as guardrails that help you really set the parameters of a decision and better use each other's strengths. I also would say that one of the larger problems in quality decision making that I've seen with these profiles is when you have a team of the same profile together. That's when you tend to have more likelihood that you're going to amplify the blind spots. And in Problem Solver, one of the key stories that I recount is working with these 2 visionary founders of an organization which is meant to interrupt child sex trafficking in India, which is this intractable, terrible problem. And all you want to do is see these people succeed. But as 2 visionaries together, they could not identify a strategy. They kept saying, the problem keeps moving and we need to move. Well, you can't build a sustainable organization that way. And so in part, by our work together, we were able to better minimize some of those visionary blind spots so they really could come up with a concrete strategy and build an organization around it that would be able to identify a pathway to interrupt the problem that they're trying to solve. And then the last thing I would say on this point is that no one profile is better than another. If you can't have all 5 in the room, you can bring them into the room once you know the 5 profiles by bringing questions from the different vantage points. And that is the best way to be able to mitigate some of these blind spots and to have a more fulsome understanding of the problems you're solving.
At the core of Myrina.ai is customization and the innovative AI you process. which uses AI to infuse your personality, style, and vision into cloning you and growing your business. Are you ready to amplify your success using AI with a community of fellow female entrepreneurs? Go to myrina.ai today. And now, back to the interview.
Okay, so let me give you a different context. I'm a solopreneur. I have to make big decisions. What do I do?
Well, I think that first understanding your profile and how you how you tend to make decisions can help you see some of your natural strengths, and again, which of these blind spots tends to get in your way. And then learning all 5 of the profiles, as I mentioned, and bringing in questions from the different vantage points, that can be really useful. The other thing that I suggest to people is find somebody who knows you as a decision maker. And that person can help you, therefore, more easily say to you, Jim, you're really good at this, but be careful about that, because this is somebody who knows how you make decisions and can also help hold you accountable. And then look for people who make decisions differently. We often want to go to somebody who makes decisions like us. Oh, Cheryl, that's a great idea. But it's much more useful to be able to strength test our decisions by finding somebody who solves problems differently than we do.
Well, and that goes back to yet another bias is I'm looking for that confirmation. So I'm going to talk to this person because they're just like me.
Right.
Okay, so the work that you're doing, I think is phenomenal, especially in today's day and age when we talk about, and the acronym is VUCA, right? Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. If we don't improve our skills in the work that you're doing, it I think leads into many of the things that we see from a statistical perspective in regards to business failures and all the things that have downsides to them. So, but I would be interested to note when you start talking about and your business, how does it align with the concept of cherish and conquer?
How does it align with cherish and conquer? Well, I guess underlying all of this work is the ability to cherish the diversity of the different ways that people make decisions, and to understand that one person's problem solver profile is not better than another's, that they all have some beautiful strengths to them. And then in terms of conquer, by better understanding the cognitive biases associated with each of our problem solver profiles, we can't ever really conquer them, but we can conquer the lack of understanding that we may have had as to why we get in our own way. And I think that this kind of self-awareness not only can be very affirming for people, oh, this is why I do what I do, but also gives you a way for the first time ever, I think, to actually have conversations with other people about the most foundational action that we take, which is the decisions that we make.
Okay, so I think you opened up me to ask this particular question. What are some key lessons that you've learned about self-love and its impact on your journey as an entrepreneur?
I think everybody probably has their own relationship with self-love. Certainly in the world of meditation, which I'm a big fan of, there's a very big movement called self-compassion. And I guess what I would say is one of the things that I do and that underpins the Area Method is to have what I call an area journal. It's like a decision diary. And if we keep a decision diary, we can have a sense of keeping an audit record of this most foundational piece of who we are. And then we can learn more about ourselves about, oh, this worked out well. Maybe I can do this again. Or this didn't work out well. Did I have bad luck? Or did I have subpar thinking? and so on. And so I think that having a way to build a more open and honest relationship with ourselves probably is a form of self-love.
Absolutely. I saw it. That's why I had to ask the question. So thank you for doing that. Okay. Can you share a moment when the passion for your business helped you actually fuel perseverance through tough times?
Um, One of the things relatively early on after I'd come up with the area methodology was this tough decision about whether or not to hold my son back a year in school. In the year right when most kids enter high school. And I would say that I was very worried about how this would impact my relationship with him. It's a big decision for any family to make a decision like this. And having Area, we got to actually do the process together. And it was very moving because we had something that we could talk about where we could move through the different parts of decision making, where we had a language to really build an open discussion and conversation. And even though he was in, eighth grade, that's a real time of discovery. So being able to have a seat at the table in this big problem that we needed to solve together that was going to impact his life turned out to be a nice thing for me to be able to lean on and for us to lean into together.
Well, as you say that, I start thinking about, I have 3 kids, and I start thinking about that process. And at some point, some of those discussions came up with one. One was held back. 2 weren't that I think were, should have been, but didn't happen. And some of the things externally that we would get, from people, saying what we should or shouldn't do. I, you know, I thought their context and what their perception was didn't align with what our values were. So how do I filter properly to take things that are, credible into driving my decisions versus things that are not?
At the very beginning of the Area Method is a tool to help people develop what I call a vision of success. You and I may look at the same problem, we're solving it for different reasons. And so a good outcome can be very different for us. Your outcome or your vision of success is not better than mine, but it's right for you. And mine is right for me. And in using this tool, you're essentially inverting your problem solving to say, what has to happen in the outcome of the decision for me to know that it has succeeded for me? And then as you run your problem through the Area Method, you are therefore investigating the key pieces of that vision of success so you know why you're solving it and you're figuring out what those key elements mean for you in a solution. And that becomes very useful in filtering some of those voices and allowing some of those voices to get tested in different parts of the process. Is that relevant for me in this particular decision, even if it turned out to be very important for somebody else? And that can help you to have much greater discernment.
Okay. Can you share an example of a time when staying true to your principles led to a significant achievement or breakthrough in your business?
I think writing my first book, definitely. So my first book, Problem Solved, is on personal and professional decision making, and it introduces the Area Method. And I didn't know if I'd ever be able to write a book. I had been teaching with the Area Method at Columbia Business School, and I thought, okay, it's time to see if there is a way that people don't have to get this just listening to me and working with me. Could I actually write this down and give somebody the kindness to just learn it in their own way and on their own time? And so my kids were leaving for camp at the end of June, and we were going to go on a family vacation at a family camp in the middle of August. So I gave myself those weeks to say, could I actually write this book? And I finished the day before they came home. I didn't have an agent. I didn't have a publisher. And somebody said to me, how could you publish a book? Aren't you afraid that people aren't going to like your ideas? And I thought to myself, I would never get the good fortune to have those conversations if I don't put my ideas out there into the world. So that's my example.
That's a great example. Can you share a story of a time when you had to pivot or adapt your business strategy?
Oh, COVID. I had been doing an awful lot of teaching in person, and then all of a sudden, everything was online. I was supposed to go to Israel to teach in an entrepreneurship program that March. And the flight was March 7th, and I think that things closed March 6th. And all of a sudden, all of this was moved online. We have a very big time change, and we also have a language issue. So that was a big pivot. And what I really experienced firsthand is that teaching live is an entirely different experience to teach well in a virtual world.
So I think it lends the question, what did you have to implement in order for you to have the similar outcome?
So first, needed to adapt the material and change the material to be able to slim it down to do something that would be practical and actionable in the amount of time that somebody could stand to be on Zoom. That's one. Two, I seem to remember that the time and dates that we were doing this ended up being like Saturday morning at 6 a.m. on East Coast time in order to make it work for them. They had things happening on a Sunday. And so there was content changes, there was delivery change, there was time change. And so all of those things needed to take place. And it was a terrific learning experience for me. I just hope it was a good learning experience for them as well.
Okay, so how do you maintain a healthy work-life balance as a woman in business, and what strategies have worked well for you?
So this is something I've thought about a lot, and I still need to always get better at it. I think people would agree that if you have anything that you're passionate about, it doesn't matter if you're an entrepreneur or not, it's often running in your mind during hours when you're not at work. So thinking about when I'm going to spend time thinking about the work that we're doing has been very useful. And a daily practice of meditation, I find very useful, which is meant for all that noise to have a chance to come forward, notice it, and let it move on. The other thing I would say that I really like is to, at the end of the day, plan the next day out, to put the thinking work when I am most alert and what is most aligned with my circadian rhythm, and to put the workaday things in the space where those need to be. And to also recognize that I try to do what I can to reduce the amount of back and forth in my email so that I don't always have to spend time on a Sunday to just clean it out. And I think that's a perennial problem for all of us as well.
Most definitely.
So those are a couple of my techniques.
Okay, so being the investigator that you are and having the journalist background and all that, you mentioned meditation a couple times. Meditation is just a generic and general word. What have you learned in regards to meditation that would be helpful for listeners and watchers?
What I have found most useful, and I really consider this a gift, is that giving myself the time to do the meditation allows all these things that both I know are running in the back of my mind and the things that I didn't know were there. And having that opportunity to see what's actually going on in my mind is really useful. I think it helps with sleep. I think it really helps with focus. And one of the other things, and each person who might do whatever they call meditation puts it in their day wherever they find it most useful. But for me, by putting it sort of right after lunch, it gives me a better afternoon, because almost every day we find that the day doesn't lay out exactly how we thought it was going to go. And for many of us, we have a time in the afternoon when our energy is flagging. But what I have found is by giving myself that transition time to sort of see what's in my mind, to notice and let it go, I have a better afternoon.
Well, and that gets, so you said whatever people call as meditation. And to me, I've seen different, disciplines, styles, and there's all kinds of information in regards to what is meditation to certain people. So from an investigative perspective, what have you found about the different styles or types of meditation?
There's a bunch of different styles. Different people like different styles. Some people might even say that their swimming or their biking is their meditation. For me, what I have found is, focusing on my breath to the point where I stop focusing on it and I start noticing these threads of thought in my mind that I can notice and let go.
So that's very helpful. Because I've heard methods where people say, okay, feel your toes. Okay, now move and scan all the way up your body and feel every single inch of your body. And I've, as you say, people do different things, which, may even be that bike ride or dog walk, or maybe even taking time out for doing a little bit of gardening. And I think the important thing is to investigate and figure out what works for you and then stick to it.
I think that's right. Many of us exercise, and I'm certainly a big fan of doing different kinds of exercise. But if we do something for our body, I just think it makes sense for me to do something for my mind as well.
Definitely two different systems, right?
Yes.
Okay, Cheryl, now it's time for our Breakthrough Blitz Rapid Round. Are you ready to help us break through?
I have no idea. Let's go.
All right. So, what's your favorite productivity tool or app?
My favorite productivity tool or app, I would just say I like to make lists. I make a do list. And for me, I find that very helpful. Get it out of my head, write it down.
So, what's your favorite way to unwind after a busy day?
A walk with my dog.
If you could have dinner with any female business leader, living or deceased, who would it be?
Oh, I have no idea. There's so many wonderful women business leaders. I don't know. I would probably say my mom. She's like the most interesting person that I know, the best reader I know. She reads more books of greater diversity. And I've just had great admiration for what she's done professionally and how she conducts herself.
What's your favorite quote or mantra that keeps you motivated?
So my favorite quote I originally got from my dad, which is I think a Henry Ford quote, which is, if you think you can or if you think you can't, you're absolutely right. And the foundation of this is about perseverance and finding your way through as a problem solver.
So, what's one piece of advice you would give to aspiring female entrepreneurs?
I would say only you can do something for yourself, and that getting started is more important than starting perfectly. As soon as you get started, you can see the road begin to unfold before you. And to the extent that you make mistakes, using that data set to help you do better in the future to fall forward. is something that over time is going to help you build your confidence and your conviction that you can get where you're going.
Okay, and what's the biggest misconception people have about being a female entrepreneur, and how do you address it in your own experience?
I don't know that there's some big misconception about being a female entrepreneur, but I do think that many people think of entrepreneurs as risk takers. And to the extent that you believe in yourself, what better risk could you be taking?
Wow, Cheryl Einhorn, fantastic conversation. How do listeners and watchers get in touch with you?
Reach out to me, please, at areamethod.com. Again, it's AREA method.com. I hope you'll take a look at some of my books and you'll get in touch about the decisions that you and your teams are making.
Cheryl Strauss Einhorn, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, and we wish you the very best.
Thank you so much, Jim.
Thanks for tuning into the Cherish and Conquer podcast from Marina. Join our community of trailblazing women at community.marina.ai and get access to exclusive resources, checklists, and guides. If you found value in today's episode, please rate, review, subscribe, and share it across your social platforms. See you soon, and remember, barriers are for breaking.